wanted you to know how wonderful things.
This is the Loud Family, UnShattered. Hi everyone, my name is Grant Loud. Welcome to the Loud Family UnShattered. You know what? I'm not even going to try to pretend to be in a good mood today because this is a very sad day for us. It's the last day of our recording. We have Tina and Ben here.
Hello.
Since way back in September of 2023, they've been working on this thing with me and putting this together and making it happen. And this has been such a remarkable experience for me. None of us would have been able to do it without the help of these two remarkable young individuals devoting their time. That's only the beginning. I'm going to go on for a few minutes.
Oh boy.
No, it's been wonderful. Thank you both so much. You deserve all of the kudos and all the gratitude of the Loud family for making this happen. It's been really just a wonderful experience because of you guys devoting your own personal time. So thank you very much.
Well, this has been a total joy and honor, as we've told you before, and it's been like a dream team.
Thank you.
Yeah.
For letting us
for sure
pester you every week with.
Yeah, sure. I'll let you help me paint the white fence. Sure, it's like Tom Sawyer, right?
I mean, nobody really
guys.
knew. Yeah, I mean, it really took, honestly, we could have used more people, but three for sure. I mean, we had our hands full with putting this thing together, but it was a total joy to do.
Mm-hmm.
Quite an experience, and you guys have been here through all of it for it's 8 months now.
It's been a little bit.
My God.
It's been a little
Feels
bit.
good though. I'm not gonna lie.
Does.
I'm pretty proud of everything that we've all accomplished. Well, even all your siblings, shout out to them for taking the time to do this too. And it's not always easy to talk about stuff that happened a long time ago.
It was so important to have everyone present in these conversations because you experienced it together and you all had different perspectives of the situations that you were all commonly in. And so, I just don't think we could have done it without everyone kind of being game to be on board.
And even more than that, we have been silent for 50 years. So I've always had a certain suspicion that one of the reasons that we haven't been contacted more often in the past is I think people think that we're angry or we're weird or we're crazy or we're broken or something weird is going to happen. So I needed everyone to hear us together the way that we are as a family. The thing that people have been responding to, gravitating to, is that there's tremendous love in this family for each other. And we went through something remarkable, but we've stayed close to each other throughout our entire lives. And we have a very close relationship with everybody. And it's a real source of pride to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, it should be.
Do you guys feel like you are as close as you are now because of the show and going through that together, or do you think that would have been regardless?
Yeah, it did galvanize us in a certain way.
Yeah.
That I don't know. I mean, we've always had this kind of relationship with each other, but when American Family came out, I just wanted to get away from everybody. I needed to be on my own for a while. It turned out to be like 20 years I needed to do that. But I needed to be on my own and just kind of get myself together. And I don't know if this hadn't happened, if we wouldn't have had a chance to look at each other and appreciate each other and understand the support that we gave to each other and be grateful for that and know how much it really means.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you guys were kind of battling multiple fronts too together because there was your mom and dad's divorce and the reaction to that. There was the reaction to Lance. There was just the reaction to your family as a whole. I mean, you guys were like battling on all sides in a way.
And plus, as you've said in the past too, I mean, we were just living life. We were all just starting our adult lives with this weird thing in our back pocket, that says, well, he might be a good man, or she never reads a book, or she has pimples, and it's like, well, I'm just trying to live my life.
Yeah. So with all that said, what is today's conversation about?
Well, in the past, what we've done with some of these intros, we kind of addressed some of the phrases that get thrown around with American Family and the things that happen with it. And we've been kind of waffling on this idea about whether or not it's a documentary or is it a reality TV show? And it's the one thing in their entire lives that Craig and Alan Raymond both agreed on was that they hated any reference to it being reality TV. But I think that it's something that we really need to address. And I think it's something that we need to finally just put a cap on and live with and move on with.
Are we going to vote? Is that...
We can. We can. Do you want to hear the counsel for the defense first?
I think it's going to be a unanimous vote. I don't think there's going to be... I think we all kind of agree.
Well, Grant, there was like an important quote from anthropologist Margaret Mead regarding this, right?
Yeah.
She had watched the show before it even came out. Is that correct?
I think Craig showed her. He previewed a couple of episodes for her because he had done a documentary with her, so he was closely aligned with her.
Okay, yeah. So she says nothing like this has ever been done. First, she says that it's as important for our time as the invention of drama or the novel.
Right.
A new way to help people understand themselves. So, what are your thoughts about that?
Well, let me back up just a little bit the way I always do, is that when you have reality TV, you need three things. You need to have a producer who has an agenda. And in Craig Gilbert, we've got a guy who recently divorced. His life is in a crisis. He wants to get fired so he can get unemployment and figure himself out. And this is a 46-year-old man we're talking about now, not a teenager. So we've got already a producer with an agenda. Then we have filmmakers that are tasked with getting an hour and a half average of footage every day for 210 consecutive days. So you have to be willing to find drama or push it a little bit whenever you have to. So we have that in Alan and Susan. And then we have a network who has placed all of its production budget for the entire year in this one program, and it's make or break for them. They have to make this thing work. So they're going to start pushing the boundaries of what even public educational television would do. So those are the three elements of reality TV right there.
You're going to make me change my vote.
Then you get the Margaret Mead quote. She immediately gave credence and respectability to the entire project because of her name. She was a respected anthropologist of the time and very well renowned. And so there's her, and then her saying that it's important. When we got to important, we just kind of stopped because that's what we were all aiming for, was an important film that was respected by an anthropologist. But what she said there, and I didn't realize this until we really started doing this, she says the invention of the drama or the novel. And she didn't pick her words casually. She's a scientist.
Yeah.
She didn't say as important as the invention of the clinical study or the documentary. She says the drama or the novel. So right at the beginning, she's saying this, that it has a narrative, an intention, and that it's got a through line to it.
Yeah.
That's reality TV.
Right,
folks.
right.
So I hate admitting it.
Right.
But that's where we land. Now, do you guys know the difference between a schlemiel and a schlemazel?
No, I don't. Can't say
I don't know.
The schlemiel is the guy that spills the soup. The schlemazel is the guy that the soup gets spilled on. So the Loud family definitely got schlemazeled by reality TV.
You happened upon it.
It happened upon us.
Yeah.
We signed on for one thing. It became by this weird assembly of different factors into a brand new creation that we're now thinking of as reality TV. And we just happened to be in the middle of it, and we happened to be in a crisis. And as Kevin said in an earlier thing about, that was you could tell that the light go on in Craig's eyes that I hit the lottery. I got with this family. I picked the right guy.
I wonder too. I mean, Craig had no idea all the stuff that was going on behind the scenes with your family when you guys agreed to do the show. And I personally have wondered, there were very specific things going on for your family at that time, not the least of which is the problems between your parents that resulted in a divorce on camera.
Yeah.
That I just wonder, had that not been going on, how would that have affected the trajectory or the birth of reality TV?
Are you saying that if Bill and Pat didn't have a divorce, then reality TV would have been a failed experiment and we wouldn't have it today.
I do wonder that legitimately, because
that is interesting.
That was such a big thing that made the stories at that time.
And Lance,
and Lance as well.
Gay person on primetime television.
For sure. It's like, let's give people something to react to. Yeah. Let's give them some drama.
I do think, though, no matter what family, every family has their own set of issues and pressures. And once you add the cameras, that could explode on camera. So, like, I do think inevitably whoever ended up maybe being the subject of this film, they would have had a different set of drama that would have happened, but definitely drama would have happened.
There's something about it that is such a weird collision of unique events between him and the filmmakers and WNET and the Loud family. It's kind of scarily fatalistic to me. It's kind of like kismet.
When I think about the drama in one family versus another, which is a great point, I just don't like to have your parents like split up on screen. Yeah. Is just something that I think no one was really prepared to see. Yeah. I mean, as we talked about in last week's episode, right? Anyway, that thought has been in my head since we've been having these conversations, because we have been wondering what kind of made this the birth of reality TV, and it's a fair question.
You can see the transition of my mom going from this meek, in the trenches homemaker, and then suddenly she's calling my dad an asshole.
Right,
That's the power. That's what the camera does. And, my dad's quote of saying that they had this rehearsal of the divorce a few times, but with the cameras there was no way he was going to back down.
Right. Well, yeah, that's what privacy does, right? Like, even in a situation when people are like, why don't we go talk about this in private at work or whatever? It's because if you don't, you might behave in a way that's not necessarily in your best interest. Exactly.
Yeah.
And today in the, in the social media world where everyone's reacting to any decision, that if you're caught on camera doing anything, like, what are you going to do? You know what I mean? Like, are you going to put up with that? Are you going to whatever?
You're going to let the world see you being made a fool of?
Exactly. Or vice versa. You know what I mean? Yeah. So,
and the one thing that I'm really missing in these conversations that we'll never know is, what did my dad do when he went to the hotel that night? What went through his mind? I mean, did he go out and call up a girl and get drunk or something? Or did he reevaluate his life? Or what did he think about that? We didn't talk to him for another couple of days after that. So why
didn't the cameras go with him?
I don't know. I think that was kind of just the end of the night.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's enough for everybody.
So you guys had breakfast.
It was a full day for all.
Full day. Many things happened. That's one question I've been asking myself is what was going through his mind?
Yeah.
Well, as we're wrapping up this podcast with the final episode, maybe we can talk about, our own reflections, our biggest takeaways from doing this.
I'm really interested to hear what you guys have to say.
I will say, I think it's refreshing to allow for nuanced conversation.
Yeah.
I think today everything's a binary or black and white thing. And to dive deep into like all the different elements all the complexities that made this show happen, this effect on your guys' lives and for family happen. It's important to like digest all that stuff and see it as a whole instead of just what, the headlines were or what, fans say even the positive stuff. Like, it's good to have like a total nuanced understanding of the complexity of this show.
Yeah, because I've often said that, television needs a hero and a villain.
Yeah.
But life needs people. It needs fallible people that are struggling to do the best they can. Bill Loud is not a villain. Pat Loud is not just a hero. These people are just making it up as they go along and doing the best they can. And our relationship with the film American Family, there's things about it that we are proud of. There's things about it that we hate. There's things that we're happy about that we're not happy about. Yeah. And it's hard to have, as you're saying, an adult conversation about the complexities of those relationships. And that's been a big plus for us in this experience.
Well, I think, and just to say one more thing about it, is like for a generation today to watch the show now, I would think they would have the reaction of being like, I can relate to this. How do they handle it? How would I handle it? Oh, that's, and see the pros and cons or whatever. Because we can all just make the best decision that we can make based on our maturity level / what the information we have. Whereas back then, when the headlines were coming out, it was this superficial world of like we have to project this image of perfection in every family. And so to see any sort of complication in any family is sort of like, look at that. Yeah. That's not us. That's them. Look how terrible they are. Yeah. But I think today we have a better understanding of and I think people would would see that and say, and digest it differently.
Well, I mean,
we?
I hope.
Well, I'm saying younger generation.
Yeah.
I think I'm specifically, younger generation.
I think that gets into a couple of interesting things. One is people at that time really were seeing themselves in your family. Right. And there was a difference between the media reaction to this and the headlines that they thought were going to sell this show versus the actual reaction of people watching the show. It was very different, right? I mean, we had fans commenting in, I pulled some of them because they were so moving in different ways. We had a Peter Noth say, when American Family originally aired, my parents were going through a divorce after 25 years of marriage. And I found what all of you were going through as a consolation. Another woman, Dawn Marie, said, I watched as a teen. When my own world turned upside down, I identified with you on so many levels. And then, of course, we've got Lance, right? We've got Gregory Irvin on Instagram who said, you guys are part of the reason I'm still alive. You made me feel like I wasn't alone as a kid. I mean, this is impactful stuff that people from 50 years ago are carrying with them. And to piggyback off of what you were saying, Ben, I can think of a lot of shows that were impactful to me as a kid and that, I loved the stories or, whatever. But we had multiple people saying, I remember this like it was yesterday. Yeah. And that's different than anything I saw
after 50 years
as a kid, right? And I think there's something about American Family that did achieve what it set out to, which was for people to reevaluate what is the American dream. Do I relate to this real family as opposed to these fictitious families that I'm seeing all the time? And I think in a weird way, back 50 years ago, before we were talking a lot about race or sexual identity or whatever, there's still that thing of representation matters and seeing myself and somebody who represents me on screen had such an impact on these people's lives that we're seeing this in the comments, that stuff that I know that I have no corollary to that, with something that I saw. And I think about if I, as a kid, saw an Asian American girl that was the protagonist of her story and she was cool and people liked her and she was just free to be herself, how moving and impactful that would have been for me. And I didn't have that. Yeah. So anyway, that's something that really kind of has been striking to me as we've been releasing these conversations and seeing the reaction. I'm like, wow, there is nothing else. Yeah. I don't think there's anything else that's like this.
Well, there was never any. I mean, we only learned what families were like by watching movies and TV.
Exactly.
So you get back to Leave It to Beaver, and, this was the first time that somebody said, oh, that's a real family. And they're pretty fucked up. So, I'm doing good. You know what I mean?
Or I see that, I finally see something that I relate to.
Yeah, and to think about today, I mean, obviously, if you're going through an issue, you can just go on Reddit and find a million other people. Yeah. And you can just talk to them directly. Yes. But to not have anyone to talk to.
No outlet.
And then to see it on the screen had to be an amazing feeling to be like, oh, thank God, that's not just me. Yeah, it was eye-opening for the entire nation. And that's why it really was a missed opportunity by America's media to not investigate it more deeply and to just think, well, this is something for me to criticize, whether I like or not, or whether it's boring or not, or whether I like these people or not. And as intelligent as they were, and some of them just have these brilliant comments, but they're a little hard to take. Even 50 years later, we've been looking at some of these. Well, you wonder now what they would write if because I feel like a lot of time when media comes out, the initial reaction and review is much different than 10 years ago.
That's true
when people can look back actually that was important.
Well, and that happened with this show. I mean, American Family ended up on top 50 shows of all time. I think people have recognized the importance of the show in years later, but it was that initial, exactly what you're saying, Ben, the initial let's just react and let's not just think about it.
It got a lot of press, but it didn't get a lot of respect.
Yeah.
And it took a long time for that to kind of kick in.
But I think the other thing, Ben, just based on what you were saying before, that idea of looking a little deeper and having conversations, I think even on an interpersonal level, it's made me ask a lot of questions of what assumptions do I bring into conversations? What things do I automatically just kind of assume is going on for someone else? When if you just pause and ask some questions, give someone the benefit of the doubt, maybe there's a totally other thing going on, you know? And so I think just every day we encounter this stuff that sometimes it's hard to just have a conversation that will completely change your interpretation of something.
And that increases as we become a more intolerant and impatient species.
For sure,
you know, because of...
Well, you said something very poignant in that message about the divorce episode that we posted about all you had to do was actually have the conversation with your siblings. And like, that is so true about everything.
Everything.
Right? Yeah.
And it's so hard to do sometimes. It's
the easiest thing to do, but it's the hardest thing to do. It's like the same,
And it's dangerous too, because you can bring up some old animosities, you know, well, you always like this, mom liked you best kind of stuff. And so it's hard to get to that right moment in life where you can actually sit down
ready
and
for
have
it.
that.
True.
These are special people, those Louds. That Kevin, Delilah, and Michelle, they're really something.
They're pretty cool.
Yeah, I know. You guys are all so different. I love that really shines through in these conversations too. You're very distinct personalities, but you see how you guys are really bonded together as a family too. Grant, one other thing I wanted to ask you, you know, we talked early on about one of the reasons you guys wanting to do this was to be able to tell your own story, you know, that you kind of had lost control of over the years. I want to know, what was sharing these conversations with the world like? Did you feel kind of a regaining of agency of your own story? Or, you know, I'm just curious what that experience was like for you.
It was important to me that we have this moment together to just put our voice back into this thing, because time was running out. We lost Mom and Dad and Lance. There were the four of us here. It's 50 years. I didn't think anybody would really be interested in it anymore, but I just wanted to have some record somewhere that we could put into the archive with the show and say, this is what the Louds were thinking. So that's been the most important thing for me, to get back into the record. The experience of doing it has just been awesome. It's been so interesting to have this really intimate time with my brother and sisters and really be able to share stuff and hear what they were thinking. And I don't think we really have these really striking memories about it, but they're deep. They're emotional, and they bring up a lot of stuff that could have been dangerous in any other or at least it could have been a conflict, let me put it that way, in any other situation. But I think it's really served to even make us closer and appreciate each other even more because we've taken time out to say, this is why, you know? Yeah, it's been really quite an experience. So does it become podcast of the century? We don't really care, you know? Do people that listen to it, like one or two people that get something out of it, that's 10 out of 10, I'm done. I don't need anything more than that.
But do you feel that your story, from your perspective, has been told now and it's out there?
You know, there's a weird thing about the delightful thing about this is the informal conversation, because it's give and take and it's not planned. You know, we have some notes here, but we're not planning anything out.
Right.
Yeah.
But the other side of it is that we don't get to be concise. We don't get to, and some of this stuff is so detailed, you need to be very careful. So we didn't get to do that part of it so much, but who cares?
Yeah.
You know, I think An American Family was always about the heart and soul of this family and being willing to put it out there and share this with people. And that's exactly what these conversations have been. So I'm done.
Yeah.
I'm good.
Yeah, that's great, Grant. I'm happy to hear that.
Yeah. And again, you know, your moderation of this thing and Ben, your insistence on making sure that we get things right and do things the right way. I could have sat down here with a recorder, but it would never have been the same without you two guys.
Well, it's been a great experience, honestly.
Yeah,
Thank you so
for
much.
sure. Amazing.
Yeah. Well, should we tell people this?
Let's tell them what you tell them.
I don't even remember what I say.
Well, we've been on the socials, and for those of you who haven't been following along, we're posting a lot of like time capsule-y type stuff from 1973, news clips, photos, etc. So if you're into that kind of thing, please check us out on Facebook at The Loud Family and Instagram at Loud family Unshattered. And our link tree has various show-related clips and links from An American Family if you're kind of interested in
and maybe a full episode. It's possible.
And
for
of course,
free.
Yeah, you can please still leave questions and comments there. We're interested in what you guys have to say. So,
and if you have time, we'd always so really appreciate if you want to write a review. We'd love to see that. If you can rate us on wherever you podcast, that means a lot to us as well. So
yeah, I mean, huge thank you to everyone who's been listening, sharing with friends.
All your feedback.
All the feedback.
Keep it coming.
Yeah.
It's been a powerful experience hearing back from people. And we're still listening. We don't have plans to do another episode, but we are talking about, well, do people want to have some last questions asked? Do they want to interact with us somehow? So there's always a possibility that we'll do a Facebook Live soon or do something else that we can answer questions or interact with you. And, just to say thank you. I mean, that's very important to us as well.
Well, that was your mini podcast before the podcast. So,
this has been amazing. Yeah. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everybody. This has just been wonderful. Thank you for allowing us to finish this story. And we're deeply, deeply indebted to you all. And we wish you all the best. And Merry Christmas and
Happy New Year.
I love it.
Well, enjoy this last conversation.
Enjoy the last one. There's a lot. We cover a lot of ground in this. So we're ending with a bang.
Let's bring them in. Right.
Love it.
Here we are together again. Last time.
Here we are together again.
The band is back together.
This is so exciting. As I mentioned to Grant earlier, I have been waiting for this conversation because there's a lot to talk about the impact of this show, really, like when you get down to it, right? So, sorry, Delilah, did I cut you off?
I was just going to say the Loud family extras are hitting center stage. So one more time.
Once again, the spotlight is not on them, but they are in center stage.
And Kevin, all the way from Jackson, Mississippi.
Live from Jackson.
Flying in.
Live from Jackson.
Grant, I appreciate you including the monitor shot of me in the Facebook post. I was like a little Martian sitting back.
We're struggling for assets here, Kevin, but sorry about that. I did the best I could.
You're looking good, Kev.
All right, well, let's get into it. Like I said, this is kind of the epilogue of everything that we've been talking about, of the show itself. And we're here to talk about that longer lasting impact that the show has had on your lives, on, you could even say American media. We'll get into all of that. But first, I wanted to maybe briefly walk through some timeline stuff of what happened immediately after the show for you guys. So first question that comes to my mind is, did this end up opening doors for you? How did it affect your lives once the show was actually over and some of the hype had died down and you were just living your own lives? Did it actually do the opposite? Did people have first impressions of you because of the show?
Preconceptions about
Yeah.
I don't think it opened any doors for us. I think it gave us the exposure and the experience in a broader world to cast a wider net in our lives and in our careers. In terms of any blowback from individuals or employment opportunities, there was more a curiosity about who we were and why we did it.
We were like aliens.
But right. There was that curiosity, which is one of the reasons we're doing this podcast. But I never really felt any specific door closing because of it in my experience.
I was in New York in 10th grade, and I just remember being in a new school. I didn't know anybody, and people were sitting behind me, and they were like, I hear that girl from the PBS documentary, Channel 13, is going to be in school. And I'm like, oh, God, this is going to be torture. But it wasn't like an excited, it's like this weirdo is going to be there. But that was my experience.
Yeah.
Kev, what about you? You went off to school, though, pretty soon after.
Yeah. It really had no effect on me. I had planned to go to school. I went to school, went to UCLA. Then I went to William & Mary, had a wonderful time there. I think that the biggest beneficiary of the whole show And the person who liked it the least was Mom.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
She got to New York, and she was somewhat of a celebrity, and she got on the A-list, and she met a lot of people and had a lot of fun because of that. So she didn't like doing it, but she sure got the benefit of it.
And she could handle it. She was just, she loved meeting everybody.
And that's a good point, because that gave Mom the cachet to get into kind of the New York society and propel her career as a literary agent, which was a very bold move.
Yeah.
It's been famously said that there are no second acts in American lives, and she absolutely disproved that. Her second act catapulted her into the world in a way that I don't think she ever would have imagined as a housewife.
In an era where it was particularly challenging for women in the workplace.
Yeah. And so New York for a long time, the literary scene, and then she moved on to Bath, England, came back to help take care of Lance when he started falling ill. She had a very rich and interesting life that was spurred on because of An American Family.
She had all those wonderful cocktail parties. I mean, they were almost out of Breakfast with Tiffany's. I mean, she had all these interesting people, wild conversations going on.
But she did that all of our lives. She was a very convivial host and made sure that people had a place to go to and drinks and dinner and everybody come to the house. That was very much her ethos throughout her entire life.
She never stopped. She worked for that literary agent who was not an easy person to work for, and she just kept going.
Yeah.
Nothing stopped her, even though he had her be sort of like a secretary,
And then she ended up representing her own writers.
Yes.
Yeah.
With That American Family, she would have been another divorcee going to New York City, looking to forget the past. It gave her a lot of credibility.
I was thinking about this, the people that she knew before and after, and it did give her some carte blanche into that, but she was a force like Lance.
Yeah.
Well, and you would think, Lance right afterwards put together the Mumps Band and had a great run in New York for 5, 6, 8 years. And you would have thought that with the notoriety it created for him, he would have benefited from that. But I saw no benefit at all. I mean, they did well. They did well because they wrote nice songs. They performed. They worked hard. But he seemed to get no notoriety. And Grant, you pursued a kind of an entertainment career for a while. And
kind of one. Kind of.
A very successul one.
No, that's fair, Kev. That's absolutely fair.
But he does have 4 Emmys now, so he made up for it.
I recorded that GMC commercial. I watched that every Friday night.
You were in a commercial, Grant?
In one of my later incarnations, yes, I did some commercial work, yeah.
Love it. What else?
He looked like a real engineer, but you would have thought that would have opened some doors for you, but it really opened no doors for you, though, did it?
No.
Well, it'll open a door if you can get a job, but you have to have talent to walk through the door. And that's a whole different conversation. But
I also think we were not pursuing fame. That was not, we'd already had.
And we weren't using An American Family and our experience as a calling card.
Sure.
Grant certainly didn't.
Yeah.
And he was an actor and a musician and a performer.
Well,
I was more behind the scenes, but we never used that as a way to get through the door. In reality, we kept it on the QT.
Yeah.
Did you guys find, well, Grant, especially if you were pursuing a career in entertainment, did you actually find that people knowing that worked against you?
Well, it's a little bit complicated, like everything is, but immediately after American Family, Mom hired the guy that was the theater director at Santa Barbara High School to be our representative. And between the two of them, they decided that Kevin and I should have a band, like the Partridge Family Band. And after all of the hatred and disdain that I suffered through from my parents hating my music career, to suddenly be pushed forward in a family band and be saddled with that responsibility, it almost broke my brain. It almost broke my head. And I acted out in the ugliest possible passive-aggressive way and finally got thrown out of the band and the house. And I thought, okay, now I get to start my career. Nobody wanted to be a celebrity necessarily. I wanted to have a career. I wanted to be a singer-songwriter. I wanted to have success, yes. But I didn't want to be connected to An American Family. That was a horror to me. I wanted to separate myself from it. I wanted to be my own person. I wanted to follow my own path. And I just wanted to get out into the world. And I think that's where we all were We're just trying to say, okay, here we are at this precipice of stepping into adulthood. Can we just take that step now? Do we have to drag this along with us?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of it had to do with the perception of an American family. When we started doing this, Craig Gilbert said he wanted to do it to kind of analyze an American family. And then in the midst of the whole thing, the divorce happens, the homosexuality happens, and then we get the negative response from WNET and the negative promotion there. They flung it out, and nobody really knew what it was. There's this: is it a beautiful thing? Is it a constructive deal, or is this just watching a bunch of bizarre people? The brand An American Family, it didn't have something that was strong that people wanted to be associated with, because no one really knew what it was.
It did have a negative impact on Dad's business, because he lived in his clientele was a very, very conservative clientele across the country, and they didn't understand it at all. So I do think financially it was a real challenge for Dad and his business.
Well, yeah, and for him specifically to have his divorce and philandering kind of on display for all to see, I could see how that would be.
I think it also had a negative impact on us living in Santa Barbara, because not only was Mom divorced, she was now single, and no one called anymore. It was a difficult time. I mean, we just had to move.
Yeah.
We couldn't really stay in Santa Barbara anymore.
There was kind of a reverse snobbery in Santa Barbara too. Like, well, why'd they pick you guys?
I just remember,
You're not that good.
And I remember the phone stopped ringing, and she was always so engaged with everybody, and everyone just stopped calling her because she was divorced and single, and then had been in this series, and everyone thought, why would you do this? And it was a painful period. That's why we moved to New York.
Well, I remember, Fred, at a certain point of just trying to get a job, like a delivery boy job or something, because I wasn't equipped to do anything. So I'd go and they say, well, weren't you in that series? What do you need a job here for?
Yeah.
And they wouldn't even consider you, So it was a long time before you could just kind of get your feet under you and just say, I need to get work. I need to move on.
Yeah, and be your own person.
It was better for me in the fashion world, it was better if people didn't know that you had been in the series, because they would have judged you accordingly. Like this person doesn't really know what they're doing, although, you'd gone to college.
And perhaps the public and professional environments assumed that we made money from this series.
Yes, exactly.
And we did not.
Yeah.
We were all stone broke. I mean, we were talked about answering fan mail. At a certain point, honestly, I didn't have any money to buy stamps.
Yeah.
We didn't have anything. Even though we were living this so-called affluent lifestyle, we were very much living hand to mouth. Mom didn't have a lot of income, and the divorce had that effect on her. And
well, so then moving into some of the follow-ups that happened for you guys, right? We talked a bunch about Death in an American Family when we talked about Lance. Let's rewind a little bit from there, though. There was a 10-year reunion, American Family Revisited special that was put together with like an intention to, let's see what the Louds are doing now, 10 years later. Can you guys talk about how that came about, given your experience with the original show?
Well, I went up to visit Susan and Ellen when they lived upstate, and they had gotten a grant from PBS, and Lance and I were talking to them, and they go, it would really be kind of funny if we did kind of a revisited kind of thing. And we thought this could be kind of funny. Why don't we do sort of a funny film about where we are today? And then they got HBO involved.
Yeah. HBO got involved, and I think that we kind of thought that it would, this is 10 years later, and we could show that there's life after that experience and where we were in our careers and in our lives, and some reflection and some, and a historical kind of paper trail for the last 10 years.
It didn't kill us. It didn't ruin us. Yeah. I just remember Mom saying, Alan and Susan want to do it, and they're our friends, and so we're going to do it. And I kept thinking, nope, I'm not going to do that. I think that we all did ultimately get together and make some demands of Alan and Susan, one of which was that we didn't want to rehash all of the stuff of the past. If they wanted to do something new, it had to be forward thinking. We didn't ask them to whitewash the story or do anything that was going to polish us up, but I just nobody wanted to go into the past, and they promised that was not their intention at all.
But then they got HBO involved, and HBO wanted the divorce scene in it.
Yeah.
So that the day that Revisited aired, we had not signed our contracts because we didn't really approve that Mom didn't want the divorce scene aired again. So none of us had signed, but they still aired it because they knew we didn't have enough money to hire a lawyer to fight it.
We did the series against I think all of our better judgment. Am I right? Am I seeing nodding heads? Yeah. We didn't want to do it. We didn't see the point in doing it. We felt that what we had done in An American Family had integrity, that it had value, and in that uncomfortable way that we have with this series, we were proud of it. We were proud of what we did. This didn't make any sense to do at all, except for that somebody said it was going to be fun, and somebody said we were going to make some money, and
Susan and Ellen wanted to do it, so
we did it. And so at the end of it, Mom was supposed to go back and view the footage and approve of it, and she got a cold or something that weekend. She asked me to do it, so I went back to go to Susan and Alan's and watch the final film. And it's one of those things where you're sitting in their apartment all night long, and at 4:00 in the morning, Alan finally said, okay, here, the film is ready. Let's watch the film. And we watched it, and I said, Alan, that's not what we agreed to. This is not why we did this. And he said, well, the studio wanted this and that. And I said, I get what the studio wanted, but the reason that we agreed to do this is not represented in this film. Mm-hmm. And that's the whole reason that we did it. So where does that leave us? Well, it's going to run for a couple of weekends and then you'll never see it again. And I said, Alan, you're just like Craig Gilbert. You make promises that once they're inconvenient for you, you don't keep them. Mm-hmm. So where does that leave us? He did not like me calling him just like Craig Gilbert. That was the end of any pretense at a friendship that I had with him. And I haven't had a conversation with him since. Not that that it was furious. It's just that, this is another breakdown in trust, that you expect trust from us and you don't return it. I don't want to look like, you don't understand the business. Well, I do understand the business. We made an agreement based on this. You didn't follow it up. So what am I missing?
So then, speaking of HBO, that's interesting that they were involved in this Revisited show. Come 2011, right? This is when Cinema Verite comes out. Mm-hmm. How did this come about, and when did you guys become aware of it?
We'd heard from Susan Raymond, I believe, that it had been in development by a producer named Gavin Pallone. And she said, you got to look out for this guy. He's going to really turn this into a scandal again. And I asked our lawyer to check out with Gavin Pallone's company whether, in fact, they were producing this or not. And the response came back very terse. It just said, yes, we are. We don't care what the Louds think. We're not asking for your approval or permission. We don't need your input. End of story. At that point, it just went radio silent until...
Mom and Dad were living in this house in Hollywood, and they had a neighbor who used to come over quite frequently, and he was an actor, and he had come over, and he was reading for the part of Lance. Yeah. We were dying to get a copy of the script, and we got it, and it had Dad as this uneducated idiot, and we thought, oh, this is really not good. Mm-hmm. We learned later, I think, that they said that they knew that the script was not really honorable to the people that we were, so they fixed it as they were filming it.
I see.
And I have to say, props to the directors of the film, because the film that they made is not the film that we read the script of.
Right.
When this guy brought the script over to Mom and us, it was shocking to us. It just didn't make sense. People have tried in the past to make this thing. There's no story there. So them trying to make a story, I understood, was going to require some stitching. And then also it turned out that Alan and Susan had signed on suddenly out of nowhere to be the consultants for the film. And so...
They'd never reached out to us and told us any of that.
Well, they tried to for a weekend, and we ignored them because forget it. Nobody wants to talk to you.
The experience with Cinema Verite, also the turnaround when we reconnected with Craig Gilbert when he was not in good health. And Craig was on our side behind the scenes, based in New York and living a very reclusive lifestyle. And Craig then gave us a pretty major entertainment attorney to negotiate our situation with HBO.
Yeah.
So it set kind of a baseline with HBO, and it took a turn that actually was
very much
a very good turning point in dealing with the HBO marketing people and production people. That was a good experience, as I recall.
HBO changed their tune towards us and were suddenly very welcoming to us, and were very, very interested in our reactions to the film. They scheduled a special screening for us, and then they scheduled a special meet and greet with the actors for us. So we got to meet the guys that were playing us all, and I got to meet the great Nick Eversman who played me, and he was just this great guy. And it was kind of, I actually had an exchange with him today, kind of out of the blue, where he just checked in to say hi because we've kind of been friends ever since that. And I asked him, I said, well, why didn't you guys ever reach out to us? And he said, well, we were really told not to. They just didn't want us to contact you for whatever reason.
I also want to make the point that when we originally talked to Craig after a million years and he had heard about Cinema Verite, he was horrified. And I think it speaks to his character that he never felt that this was something that should be for profit, or to capitalize on the series at all. And he was a documentary kind of mindset.
Yeah.
So I think it really spoke to who he was. He could have done a million things, but he really thought that this was like the most horrible thing that you could do. He was horrified.
Yeah, and he was really great.
Right?
I mean, when we reconnected with them, they had James Gandolfini playing him in the movie, and they did a real hatchet job on him. He could care less. All he was interested in was trying to help us with whatever we were trying to do. I don't know if he was trying to make up for any past errors he thought he committed in the past, but he was really supportive of us. I was very impressed with the way Craig got in there and really helped us out, get the thing organized to some extent.
Plus, he had very bad blood with Alan and Susan throughout his entire life, and that was, I think he was incensed that they were in control of how the story was going, and he didn't like that. So there were a lot of different elements involved.
Dad was dying to be involved. He was like, why are they not? I know they're filming near here. Why isn't anybody coming and talking to me?
He was getting ready to have lunch with Timothy Robbins at Musso and Frank, remember?
Yeah.
And he goes, why is Tim Robbins not giving me a call? I'm completely ready for lunch at Musso and Frank.
You heard that Gandolfini sat down with Craig Gilbert and he said, well, where's Tim Robbins? I got to tell me how to do it.
I got the book here. I got his whole dossier.
But it wasn't until we found out later that HBO said you cannot interact with the Louds.
The one thing I was impressed with, I didn't like the storyline, but those actors did a pretty good job of representing us. I mean, you look at that Diane Lane as Pat Loud. She had her dress down.
Perfect.
She had her mannerisms.
Perfect.
It was just
and
amazing.
Thomas Dekker was great.
Fantastic as Lance.
Well,
Everybody.
He did a good job, but doing Lance was difficult. He got 90% of the way there, but he didn't hit the whole thing. But he did a very nice job.
It's like trying to capture a firefly, but he did a good job.
Caitlin Deaver has gone on to be in everything since then. She's had a
really
fantastic career. And
great.
the production design, the direction, what they pulled out of that script, and what those actors really did together was really very heartening. It wasn't our story. It's definitely Alan and Susan's version of the story, and
they wanted to control the narrative. They wanted to control the whole thing.
Correct.
But I remember that cocktail party. I was talking to the actor that portrayed me, and I remember he was asking me. He says, in this one scene, Grant was saying this to you, and you said this, and I was trying to think, what were you thinking about? And I said, I don't even remember that scene. What are you talking about? What was I thinking about?
Yeah.
Who are you playing again?
Yeah.
Because didn't Cinema Verite premiere in like 2010, 2011?
11, yeah.
So it would have been 40 years later because we're now 50 years later, approximately, give or take. So,
right. And you guys were just living life.
We were all in our careers and working, and
right.
Everybody was busy.
And the thing is, it's always the same thing. Is like we're working for other people, and then your name comes up. You get the LA Times, and Cinema Verite is right there for like a week. like your boss at work, they're like, who are you?
Yeah.
Like, you work for me, but
Yeah.
you're famous too? I don't know.
Yeah. Like, what do I do with that?
It's an odd thing.
Yeah.
Another round of 15 minutes of fame.
Yeah.
Thank God it went by fast.
And they really blew it with cinema verite, because what they should have done is they should have hired us to play ourselves. And we should have redone that.
I could never fit back in that green satin suit, bro.
Michelle could let that
Or my
out for you.
tube top. And
We-
we could,
We could
underpants.
get Dad and Mom. They could redo the divorce scene, and we could have been a wonderful show.
So regardless of
Yeah.
all this stuff is going on about who owns whose story.
Yes.
And in the meantime, An American Family has been cited as an inspiration to other forms of art and other movies that have come out, other shows, right?
Yes.
So a few highlights, 1979, Albert Brooks's first film, Real Life, he has said An American Family, he was directly spoofing
Yeah.
what that concept was, right?
We heard about that coming out, and I was a huge Albert Brooks fan, and we talked about that with the family to say, well, this guy's he's gonna tear us apart. This is gonna be horrible. And we thought, well, let's not add any fuel to the fire. Let's not create more media storm about this. Let's just be quiet and be silent, and see what happens. And then you open a magazine, and there was an article with Albert Brooks saying, the film immediately got the greatest possible accolade that he could hope for, a yelp of protest from the Loud family representatives. Like, who's that? Who's that? Well, it turns out to be Alan and Susan called him up and said, what are you doing? As though they were working for us, or as they were our representatives. The film turned out to be what a maniac the producer director was, and that was okay with me. It's like, yep, you got that right. We could have given you some funny stuff if you'd called us, but you got some good stuff in there.
Yeah, and Grant, you had a funny story about your dad.
Yeah.
Right?
Later on, with Lost in America, Albert Brooks actually called my dad and asked him to audition for a part in the movie, and the line was something like, "I don't know what to tell you. You're fired. Sorry." And so my dad was going down for his audition, and he asked, "Will you run this line with me?" I said, "No." So he looks at the script. "I don't know what to tell you. You're fired. Sorry." I said, "Dad, they're calling you because they want Bill Loud to do this.
Yeah.
You know that, don't you?" He said, "What do you mean?" I said, "I don't know what to tell you. You're fired. Sorry." And so he said,
Way before Donald Trump, too, I might add.
to tell you. I don't know what to tell you. You're fired. No, Dad. They want Bill Loud. Bill Loud. Hey, listen, Albert, I don't know what to tell you. You've done a great job here, and nothing personal, buddy, but you're out.
Oh
And he just wouldn't do it. And he totally stiffed the audition.
He did, yeah. We were rooting for him, and he goes, "No, I don't.
I can't do that.
A for effort, Bill.
Yes.
A for effort. So then, more than a decade later, 1992, Real World comes around, the MTV reality show that everyone knows that show.
Yeah.
They also cited An American Family as being a direct inspiration for that show. Isn't that right?
Yeah.
Well,
Well,
I
that's
met him, yeah.
I met Jonathan Murray through my TV world, and we were at a major television convention and having dinner together, and he had grown up watching An American Family, was fascinated by it. I shared sort of our deep dive into our experience and that sort of thing. And then fast forward, he has this very successful production company and launches Real World. So that's really how that happened, was through our TV connections kind of, combining.
Yeah.
And he makes no bones about it. That's exactly what the connection was
Yeah.
for him. Yeah.
But you talk about the ramifications. When we did An American Family, we got lots of fan mail, and it was all very positive. I mean, I think a lot of women that were having difficulties with the divorce, it was constructive for them to see somebody else go through that. People having difficulties with their business, homosexuality issues. I mean, It was very constructive. And so even though the people in the media, the people in Hollywood, the production people, even though those people didn't really know what American Family was about, it resonated with people.
Well, yeah, and that's, Kevin, that's a great transition into just kind of the larger impact that the show has had, whether explicitly or over time as things have evolved. Just going back to 1973, you know, and the things that made headlines at the time were your parents divorced and your brother Lance was openly gay on the show, and that made America uncomfortable 50 years ago, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's what they said. A lot of America was having the same problems.
Well, yeah. So good point, Kevin. But in a couple of quotes that stood out to me in the show are one, you know, your mom has a conversation with Tom and Yvonne before she divorces your dad, and I was struck by the advice they're giving her. Very much reaffirms and reinforces like the woman's place is still in the home, right? Yeah. Like. She's telling them that your dad's cheating on her and she's tired of it, and, you know, they don't have anything in common anymore. I mean, some really, really raw, honest stuff she's sharing. Yeah. And Yvonne says to her, he needs a woman to look at him like he's the most fantastic thing in the world. That's her advice, right? And and then later on, you know, from your dad, he writes a letter to Lance, and even some of the things he's sharing to friends. First of all, he says, your mother is the most difficult woman to forsake. So he says he's writing this to your brother. Clearly, you know, there's some level of love and affection that he continued to have for her. But he's sharing with friends later things like, you know, marriage requires 100%. It's all the time. You know, it's a 24-hour deal, he says at one point. And he says, somebody has sold society a bad bill of goods to his friend, right? So I think that what's interesting is your guys' story really challenged these ideas of the American dream, which I think was Craig's intention, right? He says that at the beginning of the documentary, but I'm curious what you guys think has and hasn't changed about how we approach these subjects today, about like marriage and, you know, sexual identity, or just like that American dream idea.
You know, what hasn't changed are family values, but what has changed is the microscope and the analysis of family values and the dynamics of family values. You know, as you go through life, and, you know, all families are very, very different and their relationships are very different. And we certainly had a spotlight on our family at an early and important turning of age in our lives, but at the end of the day, we all pivoted, and it all made us closer, and it all made us stronger, and gave us the ability to kind of move on into a you know, bigger footprint in our lives.
You know, I was scrambling around for so much on my own for so much of my 20s, 30s, and 40s that I never had a family, but I had friends that did. And I'd go over to their house for dinner, and they'd be talking to their kids. You know, what do you want to do? What are you thinking about? What's going on? I was thinking, where do these conversations come from? When did this start? You know, they took an actual, real interest in their kids, and I think that's what the real takeaway to me is that the 60s was this dynamic, confusing, tumultuous time, and Mom and Dad had come out of the Depression and World War II in Korea thinking, we now get to enjoy the life that we thought that we had earned. They weren't prepared to accommodate all of the changes that had happened in society and what they required of parents bringing up kids. They just thought, I provide them with school, a home, clothes, and food. The rest gets taken care of. And I think that's what we really had learned from the 70s on, is that parents needed to take a much more active interest in what their kids were doing and where they were going, and communicate with them. You know, what about sex? What about drugs? We need to talk about this stuff. We need to talk about violence. We need to talk about women's issues. We need, you know, all those kinds of things did come in, and they did inform lives, and they did make society better. But in 1971, there was still a 1915 brain thought about how families were that was no longer satisfying the requirements of the job.
Yeah.
But I still think that the issues that were the focal point of An American Family, they're kind of timeless. They're still there. It's like 101 in a family, no matter where we are in society. we're still dealing with them in a different time era, how we communicate to one another, what our communication skills are. It's kind of timeless.
Yeah, because people are complicated.
Yeah.
Right.
People are complicated and issues are complicated and our vocabulary is often antiquated in how we communicate with one another.
Yeah.
But I also thought that Craig Gilbert had a good selection. I mean, when he selected us, there was a family in transition. And a lot of things happen when you're in transition.
Yeah, that was intentional. Yes, that's right.
I mean, Lance had already pretty much flown the coop. You know, I was in the process. Grant, you definitely. I mean, Michelle was the only one kind of really still anchored in the family life. But that puts a lot of pressure and tension and a lot of things on everybody. And I think that's what caused a lot of the reactions out there.
And we were naive, honestly. We just thought.
We thought we owned the story. Now we realize we don't own the story.
So you guys did say in a prior conversation, you know, you have to give some props to Craig for achieving his vision in showing kind of that, what you're saying, Michelle, there's a universality to the experience of family, right? Yes. Whatever the problems or good things may be. So I want to talk a little bit about what do you feel like the show got right about your family and about the subject of family. For example, in my mind, some things that stood out to me as I watched it were, you know, you guys laugh together a lot, right? So that's something that I feel like I learned about your family is that you all had a sense of humor and that was used a lot. I mean, you guys use that a lot in relating to one another.
Yeah.
There's like a shared love of music that I noticed, right? So there were things despite the cameras. You know, you guys were also just trying to live your lives. Were there other things you felt like, I don't know, just kind of still rang true about what was captured?
Well, I think one of the things was, you know, I think it captured the fact that we all cared about one another. We all enjoyed one another's company quite a bit. We operated like a pretty good unit.
But we were also very different people. I mean, everyone from Lance to Kevin to Grant to Delilah to Michelle, we were all very different, but
we were
kind
very
of
different,
embraced
but
everything.
we were very united.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, at the end of the day, our foundation was love. There was tremendous love. There was laughter. There was, you know, we stuck together. We looked out, and to this day and for the rest of our lives through eternity, we will always look out for each other.
Yeah.
So that's, you know, whether the camera captured that or the series captured that or not doesn't really matter to any of us. At the end of the day, we know we've got each other's extras back.
Yeah, we appreciated the differences in everybody, as opposed to we're upset about that whole thing. But, you know, we knew what Lance was a long time before anybody else did, and we loved him. It didn't make any difference.
We didn't need a name
We didn't
for
know
it.
what it was, but we knew he wasn't going to have, you know, get married or something.
But I think what the series really did was that it isolated what teenage angst was for me. You know, it isolated what Michelle was going through as the last person in the family, trying to figure out what was going on and who was in charge and what was going to happen to her, and still trying to get through school. It isolated what Kevin was trying to do of move into his next part of life. Same thing with Lance. Same thing with Moms. But what it didn't do was it did not really portray us correctly as an integrated family, which we really were then, and we still are, more than ever. I think the one camera thing specifically, it had a way of separating us all from each other, but it doesn't really show how the cohesive unit was working.
Yeah.
And it did need to work in order for us to all survive a really, really difficult time.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, I had a business partner, and he had 5 brothers and sisters. And I was talking to him about a year ago, and I asked him about them. He hasn't talked to them for years.
Yeah.
They've all gone their own. You know, I was thinking, wow. I mean, you do that? I mean, we get together almost every holiday or exchange gifts or something. You know, but a lot of families, they grow up together and they split, and that's it.
And they have these differences, and they don't, like, as you get older and people's personalities evolve, people become more intolerant. But I think that we're very tolerant.
We're supportive of each other.
Yeah.
Very supportive of each other.
even in your differences.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
all that. Yeah.
I think we had to work through them a lot too, because we were so embattled, especially at that point. We knew that we could rely on each other, and that's been a godsend.
When you're sitting there on Dick Cavett and the world is looking at you and you've got your whole family there, you realize that these people are the people that you need to get through this together.
Yeah.
And so
You know who you
regardless
can
of
count on.
anything else,
It's
you
sort of
can't-
united we stand.
You just know you have to really support each other.
Yeah.
That's the thing that gets you through life, I think.
Yeah.
When you're in your teenage years, your friends are very important to you. You take your family for granted. But one thing that you learn through this whole process is family's with you your entire life. And you got to take care of your family.
Yeah.
Friends come and friends go. Wives come and wives go. But your family is there your entire time.
Your family was super vulnerable. The show happened to capture you guys at a very vulnerable moment in your family life, right?
Yeah.
With the divorce of your parents in particular. And I actually wonder if part of that media reaction was it's uncomfortable to sell the truth, that family isn't perfect, that, the white picket fence is kind of being challenged, Grant, you said this in an earlier conversation just off the cuff, but you said there's no way of doing family right.
Yeah.
And I don't think we like that, right?
No.
I think we want to believe that there's this perfect thing that we can achieve. And in that sense, that's something that maybe has not changed as much, right?
Yeah.
Right.
The experience of growing up is too hard.
I think it's interesting what Kevin said. There are many families that we know that basically just break communication for 1 year, 2 years, a decade, an entire lifetime.
Yeah.
And perhaps, it was the foundation of our mother and father that kept us as a nucleus. And even though we celebrate our differences, but we're all in our 60s and some early 70s, and we're as close as we have always been.
Yeah.
And we respect that, and we know how cherished it is.
The whole series has been the impact that it's had on our family and the relationships with each other. It's always been a very difficult process.
Mm-hmm. Do you guys feel like, after all is said and done, what do you feel like you learned from the experience of doing An American Family?
Yeah, that's hard. We're still honest.
Yeah.
We're still trusting. We're open.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Also, it took a lot of courage. It took tremendous courage for us to engage in this endeavor and then live our lives through the decades moving forward. And that's sort of like face your fear.
Yeah.
But it also embellishes your life.
Yeah.
So don't live small.
Yeah.
Right?
And also, it's so important to share stories that through this whole experience, we've heard stories that I didn't know Grant had or Kevin had or Delilah had. And so this has been a great opportunity for us to talk about things in our lives that we didn't really know
Impacted. Yeah.
what was going on.
Yeah.
Yeah. How has it been for you guys having these conversations as we kind of wrap up our...
I think it's been really enlightening. To Michelle's
Yes.
point, we've all kind of gone, through a full circle, and it's enriched the experience hearing everybody's, perspective from a different point of view.
Kevin, anything to add to
You're
that?
suddenly very quiet.
No, I think these sessions have been wonderful sessions. It's been wonderful. What I learned from American Family, we got used badly, but we had a hell of a good time. It was an experience. It was kind of, Dad was like, let's just do it. That was what I learned is, don't let your fears stop you. As Dad used to say, you only live once, so you got to get out there and experience it.
You were the one that was the least interested in getting involved in these conversations, and you are also the one that has had the most to say during some of them, and have had some really great insights that none of the rest of us had. So have you changed your feelings about this whole process?
I've got no compelling desire to make the final statement about American Family. American Family is American Family. It is what it is. After the first meeting we had, I really enjoyed this. It's been a lot of fun.
So we had a lot more to say. Yeah.
I'm not trying to make the final statement about American Family or anything. I've just been really a lot of fun interfacing with y'all.
Yeah.
Well, that's good to hear because we're going to do another 10 of these. So
stay tuned, Kev. Stay tuned.
Season 2 is going to be very exciting.
Well, final word or not, what do you guys hope that the legacy of An American Family will be? This is something, Michelle, you said we're going to be associated with until the day we die, right?
Yeah.
Any thoughts about that?
I would say final legacy of An American Family will be the power of the family nucleus and how you stand together in adversity and move forward in your life.
Mm-hmm.
I think what's interesting is, though, although they tried to explain it, it still came down to just the nuclear essence of family struggle. And the essence of a family, I think that's what we speak to. So even though PBS set the tone that we didn't really like, that's not what people listened to and what they heard and what they saw.
What they feel.
And what they feel. Yeah. What they saw in us was somebody that was accessible and they could see themselves somehow in us. And it allows people to see that there is an imperfection in family life, and in that there's still love.
Yeah. Yes. And that's normal, right?
Yeah, right.
It's normal.
And that there's a perfection in the imperfection.
Yeah.
You know.
And I'm proud that we were very truthful. I mean, there was no trying to varnish who we were or what we were doing. I mean, we went out there, we projected ourselves as we were, and we were very truthful. Lance was Lance. Mom and Dad had their marital problems. They laid it on the line. I mean.
Well, I noticed I just watched the PBS American Family at 50, and it has Dick Cavett narrating the whole thing. And he opens up by saying, it became a catalyst for a national conversation about our culture, society, and the idea of family in America. And that's certainly what it was intended to be. It was not what happened at the time. The people that watched it got that. The people that it emotionally reverberated with and resonated with, they got that. The people that reached out to us, they got that. That made it this incredibly satisfying experience, but a very personal experience based on our one-to-one conversations or interactions with these people. So I have a lot of pride in what we did. I have a lot of pride in the way that we did it and how we handled ourselves. I have a lot of pride in our strength coming into it and coming out of it, and how we continued on in our lives, whether it had happened or not. We just continued doing what we were always going to do. We never leaned on it. We never referred to it. I'm afraid that it's a time capsule now. The rich experience that people had is hugely satisfying. But for us, it was just something that happened and we moved on and went through our lives.
Yeah.
Yeah, Greg, you once said that, and I thought it was a good statement, that it was done to generate a conversation, but the conversation really came down to, I like the louds, I don't like the louds.
Yeah.
And it was all about us. But one funny story I have about that is I had this girlfriend, and she came and she said, you told me your older brother was gay. And I said, yeah. And she said, you told me that your folks got divorced. She said, I thought you were sharing all these personal things with me. I thought it was very personal. She said, I got back to my sorority house and I was talking to, and they said, you're on TV. Everybody knew that. Everybody. She was furious. You didn't share anything with me.
That's hilarious. Well, I lean towards, Michelle, what your takeaway was. I know that earlier you said divorce doesn't have to shatter a family, but I do think that there's still a universality of family is complicated and it's hard.
It's imperfect.
Yeah, it's imperfect. And
there's a lot of emotion in them, but you can't take sides and you just have to love the people that you love.
Well, you're the right person to ask then, Tina, because you just watched it, series of conversations. So do you think that it had anything that resonated with you?
I mean, absolutely. I think just exactly what Michelle said. I think you get such an intimate picture of what's going on. There's something about watching a family just do life, you're inevitably gonna relate to something and relate to whether it's a family role or, how you deal with conflict or grief or all of that stuff. I think every family on the planet has to deal with that, right?
Yeah.
So, well, any last thoughts? This has been such a great conversation. Really an honor to be part of this and hear you guys talk about some of this stuff for the first time. Really thank you for your honesty and your vulnerability. Is there anything else you guys want to
I think
ask each
we
other?
would just like to thank you for navigating the conversation and Ben behind the scenes helping us be comfortable in this environment and articulate our family history, and I think it's been very cathartic and given us all a lot of personal insights. So thank you for that.
To hear these voices all come together and express these different points of view and experiences, it's been such a fascinating experience. This is by no means a detailed or comprehensive history of the show, but it certainly is a lively conversation about something that did affect us so deeply and that we carry with us all of our lives.
Yeah.
As we've been speaking, you've heard the story unfold, and it's just been a really great experience for all of us.
Yeah.
So
That's awesome.
Kevin, last word. Come on, top it off.
Well, I would say that this has just been like an American family. I had a blast doing both of them.
I had a great time.
Open that door.
Every minute of it.
Good time, and got to move on to something else.
And honestly, in the famous words of Lance Loud, I read this quote earlier, we're still standing loud and proud.
Well, cheers to that, guys. Cheers to imperfection.
yes, exactly.
Your family now, Tina, and you are too, Ben. Thank you, guys. I love you all.
guys.
Thank you
This is
all.
great.
Love you guys.
Thank you,
See you later.
Kev. Love you.
Bye-bye.
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 The Loud Family UnShattered was produced by Grant Loud, Tina Lee, and Ben Davidson. Music by David Poe. Find more at davidpoemusic.com. Special thanks to Harry Friedman and Cole Kuntz. This has been a Magnus et Superbus production.